Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and submit extraneous materials on the subject of this special order.
Without objection.
It's my pleasure now to recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin, for 4 minutes. He is the co-chair of the Board of Security Caucus. Mr. Babin.
Thank you, my fellow co-chair, the gentleman from Arizona, for having this. Madam Speaker, I rise to introduce tonight's special order. We're going to be discussing Kamala Harris's tenure and her appalling record as the Biden border czar. In this role, Harris has worked not to secure the border of America, but instead to deliberately dismantle our borders and put our nation's safety and sovereignty at grave risk. Her intentional negligence has exacerbated the largest illegal alien invasion in history, one probably not seen since the ancient Romans were overrun by the Germanic hordes in the 3rd century, leading to its downfall. An invasion that continues to ravage our communities and our pocketbooks while creating avenues of entry for dangerous individuals who are bent on inflicting harm to Americans and our American way of life. Since 2021, more than 350 suspected terrorists have been encountered attempting to cross our southern border. We know at least 99 illegal alien individuals from the FBI's terror watch list have been released into the United States after being in custody of Customs and Border Patrol. How does this happen? Shockingly, many of these vile criminals are earning their golden ticket into our country through the Biden-Harris administration's corrupt and dangerous CBP-1 app. In reality, an illegal granting of parole, by the way. Since day one, this administration has viciously striven to reverse all of Donald Trump's effective border policies, remove vetting protocols for asylum seekers, hand out public benefits to illegals, and actively hinder states from safeguarding their own borders and citizens. My own, the Lone Star State of Texas, to be one of them. Border czar Kamala Harris has overseen it all and must be held accountable. It doesn't take a national security expert or even a policymaker, for that matter, to comprehend that by dissolving our borders, we expose ourselves to countless threats from all over the planet. Clearly, Harris does not care about the consequences of her own policies. In fact, she and the liberal media would rather deny that she ever held the title of border czar. She is using semantics to pull the wool over our eyes, but the American people see right through it. Tonight, you will hear how border czar Harris has failed every state, city, community, and citizen of our country, how her reckless policies have led to the death or victimization of countless Americans at the hands of the illegal aliens that she has funneled into our nation, and how communities and families have been devastated by the costs and deadly drugs being smuggled across the border. Madam Speaker, make no mistake about it. This is a self-made border crisis that Kamala Harris has gone out of her way to create, and now the safety of our nation is in jeopardy. She knows this, just as her boss does, and yet the only action we have seen is her running away from the consequences of her own failures. My colleagues and I refuse to let her get away with it. I want to say thank you very much, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman. I appreciate serving with him on the Board of Security Caucus. Does a great job there, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
In Colorado, the Tren de Aragua has been overrunning Colorado communities. The border state officials have referred to Tren de Aragua as MS-13 on steroids. These criminals are the worst that the world has to offer, and the Biden-Harris regime has allowed them to make themselves at home in Colorado communities. Larry Medina was arrested by Aurora police in connection with a felony menacing at Whispering Pines condominiums. The victim reported to police Medina pointed a firearm and threatened to kill him. Gennady Pacheco Chirinos was arrested on a first-degree assault warrant out of Adams District Court. The warrant stemmed from an assault in November 2023 at an apartment complex. Giomardi de Jesus Pacheco Chirinos was arrested in connection with a non-fatal shooting the day before at Fitzsimmons Plaza Apartments. Luis Miguel Calzadilla Rojas was arrested in connection with a non-fatal shooting in front of a probation office. Yoendre Vilches Medina Jose was arrested on a warrant stemming from an assault at Whispering Pines condos. Juan Carlos Mejia Espana was arrested following a domestic dispute, also at Whispering Pines condominium. He had a weapon. Carlos Arangoran Mayora has had numerous encounters with Aurora police officers and law enforcement agencies throughout the metro area. He faces a total of 38 charges, 5 active court cases. Royberth Daniel Morez Marquez was arrested in connection with an April 4th dispute and assault over unpaid rent money. He's also a suspect in a non-fatal shooting. Jose Miguel Reyes Perez was arrested for aggravated assault, menacing, and motor vehicle theft. This is what's going on in Colorado, and that's why I'm so pleased to recognize now and yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I stand before you today to highlight the most disgraceful failure of the Biden-Harris administration with respect to our southern border. The most important job of a president is to protect our borders from invasion of any criminal element that seeks to undermine the safety of American citizens, our communities, and our nation. President Biden, in his misplaced wisdom, determined that the best person suited for that job was not himself, but his vice president, Kamala Harris. He announced that as the border czar, Kamala Harris was competent and understood what needed to be done to protect our southern border. Boy, was he wrong in making that decision. Perhaps Vice President Harris misread the memo that stated she was tasked with protecting our border, not surrendering it. Her incompetence has made every state in America a border state, leaving local governments to deal with violent criminal gangs, thugs, murderers, sex traffickers, and drug smugglers. In recent weeks, I, along with the rest of the public, have watched the events in Aurora, Colorado with horror, as members of a violent Venezuelan prison gang commandeered multiple apartment complexes, gave the green light to kill cops, and wreaked havoc on small Colorado communities. This administration insists that our border is secure. If this administration won't do anything about the vicious gangs running rampant in our country, I will. I've introduced a bill that would compel the Department of Homeland Security to quickly detain and deport all illegal immigrants with known gang affiliations. This is a common sense public policy that would help keep our streets safe and free from the terrors being perpetrated by these animals, and I would urge my colleagues join me in this worthwhile fight. A failure to do so will inevitably result in more senseless pain and suffering for our people. The presence of the gang we saw in Aurora is not limited to that town. This group has spread like a cancer throughout our country, with incidents in Texas, Wisconsin, Indiana, Chicago, Florida, Louisiana, and New York, among many others. A recent CBP report showed that over 500,000 individuals have been flown in and paroled by this administration in a massive and largely unseen mass parole program. Kamala Harris doesn't care about this crisis, and she doesn't care about the Americans that she is hurting. She never spoke to the past 2 Border Patrol chiefs that served during the Biden-Harris administration. She has only visited the southern border 1 time during the past 4 years. That's not leadership. That's not someone trying to solve a problem. That's someone who is trying to hide from a problem that she created. This crisis has created a real heartbreak and human cost. Many men, women, and children have been targeted and victims of abuse or trafficking. Something not often talked about is the mental health impact this has on the DHA law enforcement officers. In 2022, 17 members of the CBP committed suicide. That point is that something must be done. We have a moral responsibility to right this wrong. We can start that effort by deporting the gang members that have been allowed to breed in our country. We should pass my common sense legislation that ensures that illegal aliens with known gang ties are no longer allowed to live here and cause havoc. I will fight every single day. I'm here to make that happen. I would urge all my members to do the same. Thank you, and I yield back.
Representative Lopez, appreciate that. On August 4th, 2024, enforcement and removal operations, Boston apprehended Guatemalan national Jorge Luis Castro Alvarado, who was charged with raping a Massachusetts resident. Castro illegally entered the United States on an unknown date at an unknown location without being inspected, admitted, or paroled by a U.S. immigration official. He was convicted of assault and battery on a family or household member. The court sentenced Castro to 18 months in prison, then suspended all but 6 months of the prison sentence. In early 2023, Juan Carlos Garcia Rodriguez became one of the up to 140,000 unaccompanied children with whom HHS has lost contact. Just months after HHS lost contact with Garcia Rodriguez, he ran away from his sponsor and assaulted and murdered 11-year-old Maria Gonzalez in Pasadena, Texas. Garcia Rodriguez was illegally smuggled to the U.S. border through Louisiana in 2023 by a guide paid for by his parents. Rodriguez was then processed as a UAC and later transferred to custody of the Department of Health. Despite this, Rodriguez was placed with an unrelated adult sponsor who was also an illegal alien. One who knows the ravages of illegal migration is the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Van Dyne, to whom I will yield 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise today to address the ongoing and deadly border disaster that every week continues to take the lives and livelihoods of American citizens all over our country. Border Czar Kamala Harris has failed in her assigned role to protect our country and to secure our borders. I submit that Harris never intended to have secure borders, and her primary focus has been to get rid of every successful border control measure that we had in place during President Trump's administration. From the beginning, Harris's goal was to flood our nation with a tsunami of illegal immigrants so they could overwhelm our states and cities with populations that Harris ultimately hopes to turn into U.S. citizens whom she believes will create permanent Democrat control of the White House and Congress. Because of the deliberate actions of the Biden-Harris administration, millions of illegal immigrants have trafficked either by deadly Mexican cartels or by the illegal immigrant airlines and other transportation assistance run by this administration. This has led to horrific crimes being committed throughout America as daughters, sisters, and mothers are brutally attacked, raped, and murdered. At the same time, Biden and Harris have lost over 320,000 illegal immigrant children. They're likely enslaved in sex trafficking or forced labor. It's not an exaggeration to say that Kamala Harris has brought about a massive new era of slavery that our country has never seen. She has inflicted a humanitarian disaster on our nation. American citizens are losing their lives by the hundreds of thousands because of this disaster. Every week we learn about new atrocities that are committed by this administration against the American people. Just yesterday, a former Border Patrol sector chief testified how the Biden-Harris administration directed our Border Patrol to hide information from the American people about the explosion of illegal immigrants with possible ties to terrorism who were entering our country. This former border chief further testified that he was forced to release hundreds of illegal immigrants every day into communities that were not prepared to handle such an influx. The actions that Biden-Harris have been lawless, dangerous, and are purposefully designed to destabilize our nation. Truly, there has been no more destructive administration in my lifetime, and they should be condemned for these horrific acts against the American people. I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. Enforcement removal operations, Boston apprehended an unlawfully present 28-year-old Salvadoran national charged with numerous sex crimes against a child on Nantucket Island. Officers from ERO Boston arrested Brian Daniel Aldana Arevalo September 10th in Nantucket. Aldana unlawfully entered the U.S. on an unknown date at an unknown location without having been inspected, admitted, or paroled by a U.S. immigration official. And Nantucket authorities arraigned Aldana July 26 in Nantucket District Court for one count of a rape of a child with a 10-year age difference and 2 counts of indecent assault and battery on a child under 14. Deportation of officers from enforcement removal operations. Atlanta arrested an Ecuadorian fugitive listed as one of the country's 100 most wanted criminals Officers apprehended Cesar Condar Vaca during a targeted operation in Greenville, South Carolina on January 30th. The assistant attaché in Ecuador notified ERO Atlanta that Condor Vaca was wanted by Ecuadorian authorities for femicide. An ERO assessment revealed Condor Vaca legally entered the U.S. on March 15, 2021, and failed to depart as required. ERO Atlanta officers served him with a notice to appear. A notice to appear. And he'll remain in U.S. ICE custody pending removal proceedings. Knowing the ravages of illegal migration in South Carolina, I'm pleased to recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Congressman Biggs. I want to thank you for leading this special order. And what you're seeing, the pictures, the posters of what Congressman Biggs is showing demonstrates the horror that people are going through on an activity that this administration not only is condoning, they're encouraging it. And, you know, when you think about the last 3.5 years, what this administration has subjected this country to, it's beyond comprehension that the invasion at our border, he is basically changing the landscape of this country in a way that is going to take a long time to come back and recover from. Yes, we're going to deport them when President Trump takes office, but look at the lost lives that Congressman Biggs is showing, the members who are brazenly killing Americans. And let me read some comments by Czar Harris that point out what I'm saying about this being so intentional. Her comments, not only she has not disavowed any of the statements that I'm getting ready to read. Harris has called the building of a border wall stupid and useless, labeling it as President Trump's medieval vanity project. In both 2020 and 2020 campaigns, she has stated that detention centers would be shut down if she became president. In the Senate, Harris supported cutting ICE bed numbers, stopping border wall construction, and opposed all of President Trump's effective border policies, including the remaining Mexico policy and the Title 42 expulsions. In 2019, Border Czar Harris stated in an ACLU survey that she supports providing transgender surgeries for detained illegal aliens. You know, it's bad enough what she's saying in all of these comments, but the scary part about it is she could actually become our president and puts this country in a further declining position. The policy changes which she advocates along with ending the border wall, and let me say on the border wall, you ask any Democrat that has not said one word about the illegal immigration crisis, their position is walls don't work. If they don't work, then why every time we have a dignitary in or any foreign leaders from other countries, guess what goes up around the Capitol to protect us? A wall, a fence. And it's insanity that they're denying this. She is for restricting immigration officers from arresting, detaining, and deporting aliens. She's terminating asylum cooperative agreements with Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. She, as I stated, ending the remaining Mexico policy. And she's removing the adversarial nature of the asylum process, making it easier to grant frivolous asylum claims. Folks, this is outlandish. The 200,000 Americans that have died from fentanyl, over the past 24 months, law enforcement has seized an average of 2,020 pounds of fentanyl per month. That's enough to kill 458 million people. My issue is that needs to be highlighted all across this country is to at least have mercy on the children. There's 300,000 plus children that have been not accounted for and are either dead in sex slave activity. And this administration, the blood is on their hands. So, Congressman, I want to thank you for leading this charge, and I appreciate what you're the pictures that you're showing, because it puts a face on what this administration is doing to America. I yield back.
Thank you. I really appreciate the gentleman from South Carolina. Thank you. Ellen Gutierrez Saez, Johan Salvo Alarcón, and Manuel Eduardo Fuentes Gomez, 3 Chilean citizens living illegally in the United States, were arrested and believed to be part of a South American criminal gang operating in the United States, whose members commit robberies, fraud, and traffic stolen property. That group is believed to be responsible for at least 111 robbery incidents since February 2023. Nathan Karim Melendez is wanted in Mexico for the criminal charge of causing multiple injuries with a vehicle and abandoning the scene, fleeing the scene. He's been wanted by Mexican authorities since March of this year, when he was named as a suspected driver of a car that ran over a 30-year-old woman, her 5-year-old daughter, and 2-year-old nephew. He was arrested in Phoenix, Arizona in June of this year. One who knows the ravages of illegal migration in Arizona is my friend from Arizona. I recognize now that Mr. Crane for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Biggs. I appreciate the opportunity tonight. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Here we stand 3 years after Kamala Harris was installed as the border czar, helping to spearhead this administration's deadly open border policies, a task she has carried out with exceptional success for 42 months. The number of individuals apprehended illegally crossing our southwest border who are on the terror watch list increased roughly 3,000% from the previous administration. A 3,000% increase on the border czar's watch. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle refuse to call it what it is, an invasion. I'd also like to point out that we just commemorated the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. I've said this time and time again, but it bears repeating. It only took 19 depraved individuals to carry out the horrific attacks on that day. Since Biden installed Kamala as the border czar, close to 400 members of the terror watch list have attempted to infiltrate our nation. When you combine that number with the nearly 2 million known gotaways that have evaded apprehension and permeated our communities, the likelihood of potential terror attacks in the near future is chilling. What has to happen for this administration and this chamber to say enough will finally take who we're letting into this country seriously. How many foreign threats do we have to let in? How many Americans have to be slaughtered at the hands of criminal aliens? How many sexual predators have to be granted access to our communities before this administration wakes up? Kamala's record as border czar is a guidebook for what not to do to secure our border and ensure the safety of American families. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Crane. We appreciate that recounting of what's going on across our border. ERO Boston removed Felipe Augusto de Oliveira, a 23-year-old Brazilian fugitive from the United States who is wanted by authorities in his home country for attempted homicide. U.S. Border Patrol apprehended de Oliveira March 28th of 2023 after he unlawfully entered the United States near Lukeville, Arizona. He was subsequently released on his own recognizance by a Department of Justice Immigration, and I'm sure we're looking for him still. Enforcement and Removal Operations Miami, in partnership with Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, arrested Giovanni Radu, a 22-year-old citizen of Italy who entered the United States as a non-immigrant and violated the terms of his admission. He collected a total of $80,000 in the past year using a fake nonprofit. He is facing state charges, including organized scheme to defraud, failure to register as a charitable organization, and a whole host of these things, as well as carrying a concealed weapon during a felony and battery on a law enforcement officer. One who knows well, because she has some roots in Arizona as well as Florida, what's going on and the ravages of crime that is a result of this wide open border, is my friend, the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Kamek, who I'm pleased to recognize for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you to my outstanding colleague from the great state of Arizona, Mr. Biggs, and also from the great state of Texas, Mr. Babin, for hosting this special order this evening. It's time to call a spade a spade. The wide open border policies of the Biden-Harris regime are killing, quite literally killing, Americans across the country. And there's no denying this. You know, I myself have been to the border 9 times, and I have ridden along with our agents through their shifts for hours, seeing firsthand the horror, the trafficking, the crime, the gang members, the abuse of women and children. I've seen the hundreds of thousands of wristbands littering the ground along the riverbanks, the wristbands that the cartels force people to wear to show which cartel they belong to, how much they have been paid, and of course, what number they are. It's such a big operation that the cartels have created the most efficient means possible to move people into the country illegally. And what's worse, the American government, Biden and Harris, they're helping the cartels do it. How, you might ask? Well, it's by taking away critical resources from our Border Patrol agents, by not enforcing the current laws on the books, and by taking away policies that stop the flow of illegals. Not by legislative action, but through executive action, of course. And I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that Biden and his border czar, Kamala Harris, they don't care about the law. When it gets in their way, they subvert it. It's clear they have zero regard for the American people, despite nearly 300 people a day dying of the trafficked fentanyl that comes across the border, or the thousands who have fallen victim to violent crime by illegals. They just simply ignore us, pretend like it doesn't happen, it doesn't exist. Now, while the vice president, aka border czar, pretends to care now all of a sudden about our southern border, I have a few questions for her. Madam Vice President, do you know how many Americans have been harmed by criminal illegal aliens? Do you know how many lives have been forever changed by the violence perpetrated against them by the people who broke our laws you invited here, you flew here, they have crossed our border and harmed our citizens? As if every town in America wasn't already a border town, I ask this: what about the hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied minors trafficked into this country for whom the federal government knows nothing of their whereabouts? 325,000 kids that have been lost under your watch. Now, what have you done about that? Do their lives not matter? These children have been forced into child labor situations, sex trafficking, abuse. What has been done about that? And it happened on your watch. House Republicans have been correcting the record, shining a spotlight on the disastrous crisis at our southern border for 4 years now, sounding the alarm of the failures of this administration, and particularly border czar Harris. She's not fooling the American people by pretending to care all of a sudden. She's not fooling this chamber. She's certainly not fooling the angel families that have lost loved ones due to the reckless policies that she and President Biden have put forth. We need a real commander-in-chief, not a czar, not someone who's cackling, laughing and making jokes. It's not a laughing matter. We certainly don't need a trafficker-in-chief. That's what we have now. We need a real commander-in-chief, and November is coming. With that, I yield.
I thank the gentlelady and appreciate her comments and her experience along the border. In August of 2023, illegal alien Kindu Jensi Zamambu was charged with felony first-degree sexual assault and misdemeanor unlawful imprisonment for assaulting a woman at a hotel in Cheektowaga, New York. Zamambu, a 23-year-old national of the Democratic Republic of Congo, entered California on February 13, 2023. He was arrested about 1 mile west of San Isidro, which is the San Diego area. ICE enrolled Zamambu in alternatives to detention and released him into the U.S., and less than 6 months later, he was assaulting a woman in New York. Daniel Hernandez Martinez from Venezuela. Within 6 months of his release into the United States, Venezuelan national Daniel Hernandez Martinez committed at least 22 criminal offenses in New York City. He's charged with petty larceny on 4 separate occasions, criminal possession of stolen property on 3 occasions, multiple charges for menacing, assault, attempted assault, criminal mischief, possession of burglary tools, disorderly conduct, and more. He was released into the United States without any legal justification. In addition to his crimes, DHS records indicate he is a suspected member of the dangerous Tren de Aragua gang. Currently, there are no DHS records to indicate that ICE has removed him from the country. Someone who knows the ravages of crime produced by illegal migration is the gentleman from New York, Mr. Langworthy, who I'm privileged to yield 3 minutes to.
Thank you very much to the gentleman from Arizona for yielding the time and for hosting this special order hour to bring a real attention to this crisis. Just last month, a family of 4 was brutally murdered in the town of Unaccompanied, New York, just outside of Rochester. 2 little girls, babies, 2 and 4 years old. They were slaughtered in cold blood by a man who should have never been on American soil in the first place. He was murdered beside their parents. The murderer was an illegal immigrant, wanted for murder in his own country, who somehow managed to sneak across our border, get a fake ID, and tear this family apart. This is not an isolated case. Just last month, ICE agents from the Buffalo office arrested a Peruvian gang leader and a serial killer in Broome County near Binghamton. He was responsible for 23 murders in Peru. He was so callous of a killer that he had their victims' faces and names tattooed on his body. And here he was hiding in plain sight in upstate New York. Now, how did we get here? Vice President Kamala Harris, the failed border czar herself, and the Democratic leaders removed the previous administration's border policies that actually worked, that were actually keeping America safer. And they allowed this border crisis to spiral out of control. Kamala Harris has had 39 months, 39, to get this border crisis under control. And what has she done? Not a damn thing, nothing, no action, no accountability. What have we seen instead? Record-breaking illegal crossings at our southern borders, also at our northern borders, which are becoming a new hotbed of illegal crossings. Rampant drug trafficking of deadly fentanyl into every community across the country, and violent criminals walking right into our neighborhoods. It's not just Washington that's to blame. Democrats in my state capital of Albany, in New York City, they've rolled out the red carpet for illegal immigrants in New York State. Driver's licenses for illegals, check. Free housing, food, and debit cards for illegals, check. It's like if Governor Hochul and her Democratic allies, they put up a giant neon sign saying, "Come on in, we're open." Mr. Speaker, New York's sanctuary state policies are endangering our citizens. This family in Irondequoit paid the ultimate price for the Democrats' reckless agenda. Under President Trump's administration, we had control of our borders. We had policies that worked, building the wall, enforcing Remain in Mexico, and ending catch and release. But under Biden and Harris, all we have is chaos. The wall was halted. ICE and our Border Patrol, they've been limited. And criminals are running free in sanctuary cities like New York. Let me also remind everyone that 158 Democrats voted against the Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act just yesterday to ensure that anyone crossing our border with a history of violent assault or sexual assault or domestic violence is turned away or deported immediately. 158 Democrats voted against that bill. I ask my colleagues, how many more lives need to be lost before this administration wakes up? How many more families must suffer? How many more families must be torn apart? The American people, they're sick and tired of this crisis. They're sick of crime and open borders and endless excuses. Enough is enough. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I appreciate his stirring testimony. Appreciate that. In November 2023, Jose Barrera Amaya was arrested for drunken conduct and fighting. DHS arrested Barrera Amaya, but the agency released him on the very same day. Just months after his first arrest in March of 2024, Barrera Amaya was arrested for stabbing his neighbor and his neighbor's brother at a laundromat. DHS first encountered Jose Barrera Amaya in December 2021 along the U.S.-Mexico border, and after being expelled pursuant to Title 42, press reports indicate that Barrera Amaya re-entered the country as a getaway through Eagle Pass, Texas. Jose Ibarra from Venezuela. Border Patrol apprehended Jose Ibarra in September of 2022, and the Biden-Harris administration released Ibarra into the U.S. just one day later because it determined that Ibarra's release was warranted due to urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. On February 22, 2024, Jose Ibarra murdered 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley in Athens, Georgia. Riley's body was found on the University of Georgia campus after she had gone for a run. A day later, authorities arrested the 26-year-old Venezuelan national in connection with Riley's murder and charged him with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated battery, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, kidnapping, hindering a 911 call, and concealing the death of another. But Laken Riley would be alive today if Biden-Harris were enforcing the law instead of releasing hardened criminals like Jose Ibarra. It's my privilege to yield time to the gentleman from Georgia who knows what the ravages of illegal migration has done to Georgia, Mr. Allen, for 3 minutes.
I want to thank my friend, Representative Biggs, for hosting tonight's special order along with my good friend Brian Babin as well, and talking about the devastating impact the crisis at our southern border is causing our country. And it's every state is a border state. Obviously, we've lost a loved one in Georgia. I got a text, interestingly enough, today from a small rural town in my district that basically they said it is a third world country here. And this is in rural America. And they said, she said, I don't mean to complain, but we can't even go to the grocery store. You know, I'm sure it's been said here many times tonight, but over the past 4 years, the Biden-Harris administration, you know, they have an open door policy. I mean, when those candidates, when they were running for president, raised their hand and said that we would give away free health care, every single one of them raised their hand. We should have known then what was going to happen. And I don't understand why the American people weren't alerted by that, because I've been on mission trips to these countries. I've tried to help these people in their home country, medical and buildings and other things. They have no health care. Since the Biden-Harris administration took office, and with Kamala Harris as border czar, there have been over 10 million illegal immigrant encounters and roughly 2 million known gotaways. And gotaways are here, they're here for a different reason, and it's not good. I can't tell you on the Energy and Commerce Committee how many hearings we've had dealing with fentanyl and a mom losing a child to fentanyl. You know, it's the leading cause of death of men between ages 14 and 40 in our country. How can we continue to allow this? Worsening the already dire situation, this administration has failed to remove 99.7% of illegal immigrants released into the United States, making every community, every state a border state. Now, I've been to the border multiple times. And what I've witnessed is this. It's the most inhumane process I have ever witnessed. It's disgusting. Children pinned up like animals. I asked the Border Patrol, I said, you know, where do these people get the money to pay the cartels? And I understand the cartels, Representative Biggs, are making $32 million a week down there. And I said, how do they pay for this? They said, they don't have the money. And I said, well, what guarantees payment when they get here? This is what we are allowing, and this administration is allowing in this. It's the most horrible thing I've ever heard. They are endangered servants in the beacon of freedom. Endangered slaves to the cartels. And guess what? If those cartels don't get paid, they start killing off their family members. How disgusting. How can this administration be allowed to continue this barbaric policy? And they could put an end to it. I mean, I don't know why the vice president on the campaign trail hadn't said, I'm going to stop this tomorrow. They can do it, Andy. They can do it. I saw and witnessed them coming across in a boat. And I said, so why don't y'all stop the boat? And they said, well, you see those children? If we stop that boat, they will start throwing the children in the river. How can we allow this, America? It is, like I said, it's barbaric. These are war criminals. And we lost a National Guard soldier trying to save someone from drowning, and he drowned trying to save them in that river. Folks, I could be here a long time, but enough is enough. The House has taken action by passing the most comprehensive border security bill in the history of the United States Congress, H.R. 2. The Senate has not taken up that bill. We must secure this border. Call your senators. Demand that they stop these horrible crimes we're seeing committed at this border. And let me tell you something else that nobody's talking about. We have the most generous legal immigration system in the world. Why don't we talk about improving that system? Bipartisan. We should be recruiting the best and the brightest into this country, the most skilled. 1 million people per year are legally allowed to apply for citizenship in this country and go through the process. We also have 1 million student visas. Folks, we need to fix this problem and stop this inhumane and really just barbaric activity that this administration is carrying on with right now. It's disastrous. And with that, sir, thank you for the time, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Appreciate that, and all your good work on this issue. Appreciate it. Jesus Enrique Ramirez Cabrera was arrested September 7th after abducting a high school girl in Manassas, Virginia. Cabrera allegedly approached the girl on her morning walk to school and falsely identified himself as a police officer, then forced the girl into his car and abducted her. Thankfully, the girl was able to escape with minor injuries out of the moving car. He was found charged with abduction, robbery, impersonating a police officer, and a petty larceny. U.S. Border Patrol had arrested Ramirez Cabrera on December 19, 2023, after he unlawfully entered the United States near San Luis, Arizona. U.S. CBP issued Ramirez a notice to appear before a Department of Justice immigration judge and then released him from custody. Here's another case that impacts Virginia. Jose Fabricio Villezaga Vargas, who was a Bolivian, was arrested by U.S. Border Patrol on April 24, 2023. Now remember this, April 24, 2023, after he unlawfully entered the U.S. near El Paso, Texas. Villezaga was served with a notice to appear before a DOJ immigration judge who released him on his own recognizance on April 25, 2023. Following his arrest and his release, he was arrested by Fairfax County Police on May 3rd on an ERO Washington lodged an immigration detainer against Villezaga. The Fairfax County Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court convicted Villezaga of misdemeanor sexual assault of a child aged 13 to 14 and sentenced him to 6 months in jail, but the court then suspended all 6 months of the sentence. The Fairfax County Adult Detention Center refused to honor the immigration detainer and then released him from custody without even notifying ERO Washington, D.C. Villezaga was again arrested on August 8th, this is all 2023, by Fairfax County Police and charged with misdemeanor DUI. The detention center refused to honor ERO Washington's immigration detainer again and released him without notifying ERO Washington, D.C. Fairfax County Police arrested Villezaga a week later and charged him with 7 counts of felony possession of child pornography, felony possession of obscene material with a minor. The detention center refused again to honor the immigration detainer and again released Villezaga onto the streets without notifying ERO Washington, D.C. Now, ultimately, on August 19th, now remember, this is all 2023, in Annandale, Virginia, 36-year-old Bolivian Jose Fabricio Villezaga Vargas was apprehended by ERO, Enforcement Removal Operations, and convicted of sexually assaulting a Virginia child. He's also now charged with DUI and possession of child sexual abuse material. The point of it is, you see how much havoc this one individual wreaked upon Virginia. That's what you have because of the Biden-Harris open border policies. And I am so pleased to yield to my friend who has seen the ravages of illegal migration in Virginia, to my good friend, the representative for Virginia for 4 minutes, Mr. Bob Good.
Thank you to the distinguished gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, who has led 4 border trips that I have been on during my time in Congress. Been there 6 times, but 4 times under the leadership of Mr. Biggs. Appreciate his leadership on the Border Security Caucus and leading this special order tonight on this all-important policy depicting the harm being done in our country, the existential threat to our country, which is the border invasion. I find it interesting that Democrats don't care about the border invasion. They just don't like you to call it a border invasion. Democrats don't care about the illegal aliens flooding into our country. They just don't like you to call them illegal aliens. Because whether it's their policies on energy and climate, or national security, or national defense, or law enforcement, or pro-criminal, I should say, whether their policies on transgenderism, abortion extremism, or this policy of tonight, the immigration border invasion, Democrats cannot be honest with the American people about what they really believe and what they really want to do to our country, or they would never win another election. If the American people fully understood the harm the Democrat Party is doing with this border invasion, and that they are doing it on purpose, that it is the plan that they are executing, they would never win another election. That's why Border Czar Harris, who has massively failed at her one job, the one job we know that she was given as vice president, the Border Czar job, she's now trying to distance herself from this responsibility and the catastrophic impact upon the country. You see, the fundamental difference between Democrats, or VP Harris, and Republicans on the border and immigration is Republicans believe that America should decide who's able to come to our country and under what conditions. Democrats believe that everyone around the world, the 96% of the world's population that does not live in the United States, is entitled to come to America legally or illegally, and in spite of whatever their background, their intentions might be. For them, the non-citizens, the illegals, get to decide and set the policy. That is why they will never answer the question of how many is too many, or what is the end game. Is it because they believe that these illegals flooding our borders are just truly unregistered Democrats who will vote for them legally or illegally in the next election? That's why they opposed the SAVE Act. They didn't even want any efforts, any attempt to try to prohibit or prevent non-citizens from voting in our elections. Are there policies because they want to transform America by flooding our country with non-Americans who don't speak our language, who don't know or respect our laws, who haven't earned their citizenship or demonstrate they can contribute to our society and make us better and stronger, who aren't familiar with, much less devoted to our Constitution, who haven't embraced our values or culture, so that if you flood enough of them in here, illegally or otherwise, we will no longer at some point be America. How do they not care about their own DHS's numbers of some 12 million illegals who've come over the past 4 years, with some 3 million known gotaways, the truly dangerous ones who avoid apprehension, who avoid surrendering for the free social services, housing, education, health care, and so forth that's provided by the Biden-Harris administration. And the stress on our public safety, as has been so effectively shared tonight by Congressman Biggs and the others who've spoken before me. Do the Democrats and Border Czar Harris not believe the border invasion is happening? Do they not believe it's a bad thing? Again, if the American people knew and understand the understood the Democrat position on the border and the illegal invasion, they would never win another election if they realized they are doing this to us on purpose. Only time will tell how dangerous the illegals are whom the border czar Harris has helped invade our country. Only time will tell the harm that awaits the citizens of the United States from those who evaded apprehension, those who have the criminal backgrounds, the terrorist ties, and are trafficking drugs and women and children into our country. This is Kamala Harris's America, and the American people are paying the price, as has been described so effectively here tonight, and the American people have had enough. Thank you, Congressman Biggs, for leading this special order tonight, and I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Good. It's a pleasure to hear from you and have you participate, and I thank you so much. And after everything we've heard tonight, it's no wonder that Kamala Harris has been working hard to distance herself from her role as the border czar. Under her watch, more than 10 million illegal aliens have crossed our border. 350 terrorists have been stopped at the border, of which 100 of those were released into the country. And that's just who we know about. Since 2021, more than 200,000 Americans have died from fentanyl overdoses, and enough fentanyl has come into the country to kill 458 million people, more than enough to kill every American alive. More than 300,000 children have been misplaced under the border czar's watch. In fact, she can't even tell you exactly how many are missing, has no idea where they are. All we know is that sometimes you've had an individual sponsor receive as many as 40, 50, 60 unaccompanied children who we now don't know where they are, and we don't vet the sponsors anyway. But now Kamala Harris wants us to believe that she would be tough on the border, that she would solve the crisis. And why would anyone believe her? What would she do differently than when she was second in command of the executive branch and designated the border czar? Well, the reality is she wouldn't do anything differently. And we know this not only from her record as the border czar, but also from the policies she has supported throughout her career. Let's just recount some of those. For instance, the border wall. She called it stupid, useless, and a medieval vanity project. Not unlike Arizona's, one of Arizona's congressmen, Mr. Gallego, who said it's stupid and useless. But here we have Kamala Harris saying that detention centers need to be shut down, promising to do so if she was president. She has supported measures to reduce detention bed numbers, cut funding for border wall construction. She opposed all of President Trump's effective border policies, including Remain in Mexico and Title 42. She's even said she supports using taxpayer dollars to pay for sex change surgeries for detained illegal aliens. Now, does that sound like someone who wants to fix the border? Does that sound like a border state prosecutor, which she now aggrandizes herself as she goes around the country campaigning? There should be no doubt that if Kamala Harris is in the White House next year, we will only get more of the same and maybe even worse. If you thought 10 million illegal aliens in 4 years was bad, you just wait. The American people should not be fooled. Now here's talking about not be fooled. Here's what you have from former San Diego Sector Chief Agent Aaron Heitke, who told members of the House Homeland Security Committee on Wednesday that the White House repeatedly tried to fake America out to, quote, quiet the border-wide crisis, close quote. What was she doing? What was the Biden-Harris administration doing? Shielding information from the press and concealing crossings by dangerous migrants with terrorist ties. This is what he said. Quote, I had to release illegal aliens by the hundreds each day into communities who could not support them. To quiet the problem, 2 flights a week were provided from San Diego to Texas. These flights simply brought aliens that would have been released in San Diego over to Texas. Each flight costing about $150,000. That's what Kamala Harris border czar did. Now, what else did the administration do? What else did she do to hide what's happening in the border? Well, for one thing, they don't count CBP-1 entrants or the Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua program as encounters. So when you count and you see the number, you're not going to see that. So what does that mean? That means in the last 15 months, CBP-1 people have come in and been released into the country under that fraudulent, illegal program, by the way. 815,000. 815,000 just in that program that they don't count. Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, 530,000 over the same period of time. 530,000. You wonder why you got trained to Aragua all over the country? By the way, about 6 weeks ago, CBP actually issued from their headquarters to the field offices a notification saying, hey, watch out, Tren de Aragua is now embedded in infiltrating the country, but is moving to the northeast part of the United States of America. At the same memo, they said, also be aware that Iran and Iranian proxies are flooding our border with terrorists. That's not Biggs talking. That's Kamala Harris's own administration admitting their failure. How about this? Jerome Powell, just yesterday, you know who he is, the head of the Federal Reserve. He said, you want to know what's causing rising unemployment? Unfettered illegal migration. That's from Kamala Harris's administration. They appointed Jerome Powell, head of the Federal Reserve. That's what you see from this border. And you know what? I've literally listened to some of my colleagues in our committee say, there's no crisis on the border. There's no problem on the border. El Paso, for instance, is a loving community. We don't have a problem. Well, you know what? We have a problem, not just on the border anymore. Arizona is a transit for illegal migration. Phoenix is a hub for human sex and drug trafficking. We've got multiple interstates going through there, and the illegal migration goes from Phoenix, distributed throughout the country. That's why in Arizona, Texas, California, New Mexico are now not the only states suffering under the rampage of an invasion of illegal migrants. It's every nation. Every state, every community. So when you talk about who controls the border, it's the cartels. The cartels control the border. And there are multiple plaza fights going on right now between various factions, some within the Sinaloa cartel in and of itself, going after each other, trying to pick up pieces so they can control the plaza. Yeah, that's what's going on. And why is it going on? It's because this administration refuses to enforce the law. It's going on because when President Biden was elected, within 72 hours, he'd issued more than 100 executive orders, many of which were to basically emasculate the border security policy of the previous administration under Donald Trump, which was so successful. I'm going to give you now, how am I doing time? I'm going to give you now just one quick example. Yuma sector. Last year, Donald Trump was president, fewer than 8,600 encounters. There have been weekends under this administration that they've had 8,600 encounters. Tucson sector, 60,000 per year on average under the previous administration. Under this administration, there have been months nearing 60,000. That's what you have to understand. It isn't just numbers. These numbers represent people who come in here, some with benign intentions, others with malevolent intentions. Ladies and gentlemen, this has got to stop, and it must end now. But this administration refuses to do it. H.R. 2 sits languishing over there in the Senate. It's been there for a year and a half. That is a bill that would bring this to a halt quickly. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back and thank you for your indulgence.